Welcome to Session 2 for Understanding, Safeguarding and Prevent for your Level 2 certificate in Understanding, Safeguarding and Prevent. Brought to you on behalf of Poplar HARCA by Solucious Equinox Training Solutions. My name is Phil Church and I shall be your session narrator. What does your learning journey look like? Well, after Session 1, Understanding the Prevent duty, you should have either have completed your written assessment or at least made a start on it. Session 2, Understanding Safeguarding, is followed by another written assignment. And Session 3 is Understanding Online Safety. Again, following that is another written assessment, with an optional additional support session if you require it. Once your assignments have been submitted and assessed, they will be sent for internal quality assurance. And once completed, you'll be awarded your Level 2 Understanding and Safeguarding Prevent certificate. And there's full tutor support throughout the programme in case you need it. Completing your assignments. It is important to understand the action verbs in the assignment questions. And action verbs such as define. Your answer must give the precise meaning of a word. Describe. In order to describe something, you must give a detailed account of it. As stated in Session 1, imagine you're trying to describe someone to a friend of yours. You don't just say eyes, nose, mouth, ears, you go into some detail about each of their key features. That's what we want to see with a description. Explain. You need to ensure that your answer is clear, revealing relevant facts. How does it work? What are their key elements? Identify. Your answer should establish who or what something is. Don't just make a list. We'd like to see some detail around your findings. We will tutor you throughout the programme and help you to complete the 3 assignments. Once you submit these assignments, they will be assessed and you will have regular tutorials with your tutor at Poplar HARCA throughout the programme. All your completed assignments will then be submitted for internal and external quality assurance, and once this process is complete, you'll be awarded your qualification. Our remote assistance service, we can be contacted at learners@soluciousEquinox.com, but it is important your email subjects must be headed with #2 safeguarding to avoid them being lost. And our telephone numbers are here in case you wish to contact one of us. The aims of Session 2. Understanding Safeguarding. By the end of this session, you'll understand the term safeguarding. You'll understand national and local context of safeguarding and protection from abuse. Know how to recognise signs of abuse and potential harm, and know how to respond if abuse or harm is disclosed. Contest, the prevent duty. In your last session we covered contest. Do you remember what the 4 strands were? Pursue, to stop terrorist attacks. Prevent, to stop people becoming terrorists or supporting it. Protect, to strengthen the UK's protection against terrorist activities. And prepare, to mitigate the impact of terrorist attacks. Safeguarding. What is safeguarding? Well, it's the primary responsibility of organisations to keep people they are responsible for safe. Which organisations are we talking about specifically? And what is safeguarding? What would their safeguarding policies cover and why? Well, you may have come up with the following. These organisations are such as local authorities, schools, nurseries, colleges, social care and the police. And safeguarding is about protecting children and vulnerable persons from maltreatment, preventing impairment of children and adults, vulnerable adults' health and development, ensuring that children grow up consistent with the provision of effective and safe care, taking action to enable children and vulnerable adults to have the best outcomes, and policies such as weapons policy, anti-bullying and harassment processes, health and safety, conducting background checks, policies where concerns about another person are raised, identification requirements, safety and security processes, support for those organisations are responsible for, risk assessment processes. Question 1 is asking you to define what safeguarding is. So remember, it's about protecting children and vulnerable adults from maltreatment, preventing impairment of children's and vulnerable adults' health and development, ensuring that children grow up in circumstances consistent with the provision of safe and effective care, and taking action to enable all children and vulnerable adults to have the best outcomes. Key legislation. Working Together to Safeguard Children 2015. The Children Act 1989. The Children Act 2004. Children and Social Work Act 2017. Safeguarding Children in Education 2004. The Childcare Act 2006. Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Act 2006 and the Children and Families Act 2014. And have a think about what the legislation covers and have some examples of its application to gain a contextualised understanding. Because question 2 is asking you to identify 3 pieces of current legislation relating to safeguarding. You might want to consider the Children's Act, the Children and Social Work Act, working together to safeguard children, keeping children safe in education, the Childcare Act, Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Act, and Children and Families Act. So have a think about these pieces of legislation and some key parts about these pieces of legislation and what they aim to do and what they cover. As I say, when it comes to identifier, we don't want to see a list. So I don't want to see the Children's Act 1989, Children and Social Work Act 2017. Tell me a bit about them so I know that you understand them fully. A right to stay safe. Various treaties, laws and policies. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child 1989, with 54 articles, sets out the rights and freedoms of all children, including those to ensure that they are kept safe and cared for, and children are to be protected from all forms of physical or mental violence, injury or abuse, neglect, negligent treatment, maltreatment or exploitation, including sexual abuse by those looking after them. Countries signed up to treaty, including the UK, are legally bound to implement the legislation. Statutory guidance working together to safeguard children was published in 2015, and it sets out how organisations and individuals should work together to safeguard and promote child welfare. There are versions for young people and younger children, and the guidance is for local authorities, maintained schools, academies and free schools. Legislation in England states that people who work with children must keep them safe, and those jobs involve caring for, supervising or being in sole charge of children or young people must have enhanced disclosure and barring checks, or DBS, used to be known as the CRB. DBS identifies whether someone is included in the 2 DBS barred lists of persons who are unsuitable for working with children and young people. Persons seeking to work with young persons or children must apply for a DBS certificate. There is now only one organisation that deals with all aspects of checking whether a person is fit to work with children and young people, the Disclosure and Barring Service. Those who are barred regulated activity must not be involved in any unsupervised activities such as teaching, training, instruction, caring or supervising children, provide advice on well-being, driving or transporting children. Work in establishments with an opportunity for contact such as schools, children's homes or childcare premises, provide relevant personal care, or become childminders or foster carers. Safeguarding is therefore in essence about protecting people's health, well-being, their human rights, enabling them to live free from harm, abuse and neglect. Question 3 is asking you to explain the right to stay safe. So you may want to concern yourself with Article 9 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child 1989, and it states that children have a right to be protected from all forms of physical or mental violence, injury or abuse, neglect or negligent treatment, maltreatment or exploitation, including sexual abuse by those looking after them. And the UK signed the treaty in 1991, making it law that legislation to support Article 19 be implemented. The difference between safeguarding and child protection. Child protection deals specifically with procedures to prevent children who are at risk of suffering or who are suffering significant harm due to neglect or abuse. Organisations' safeguarding policies will include procedures to ensure the welfare of children is paramount, protect all children from harm and abuse, take all suspicions and allegations seriously and respond to them appropriately, report all concerns of abuse to a designated safeguarding officer or appropriate authorities such as the police or social services. Child protection policies will include the name of the designated child protection officer at the early years setting and the senior manager who will support this person's role. A written statement outlining the early years provider's commitment to protecting children from harm from IT, including e-safety measures, procedures for early interventions where needed or where there has been a disclosure they are being abused or neglected, and a process for sharing information with other appropriate agencies or professionals. Written procedures detailing how to deal with situations in which a child or an adult is accused of abuse, procedures on how referrals are made and to whom, a written code of practice for behaviour of all staff and children, and a whistle-blowing procedure. Safeguarding, how to protect and prevent harm. Child protection, doing something about it. Question 4 is asking you to explain the differences between safeguarding and child protection. So remember, safeguarding is about protecting people's health, well-being and human rights and enabling them to live free from harm, abuse and neglect, whereas child protection are procedures developed to prevent children who are at risk of suffering or are suffering significant harm due to neglect and abuse. Please don't just copy and paste this. I'd like to see some extra detail from yourself showing that you have done some research around this to explain the differences. Give me some examples of previous cases where that may be necessary as well, or where it's contextualized to your workplace would be even better. National policies and local systems. Policies, organisations and legislation make up a framework of systems to deal with safeguarding and protection from abuse. Working together, the system covers everyone involved in care, such as screening people who work with children and vulnerable people, raising awareness on safeguarding and protection, reviewing, developing laws and policies, monitoring standards and making inspections. National policies, the Care Act 2014 and accompanied statutory guidance. The legislation provides a legal framework for adult safeguarding, and the statutory guidance is mandatory and must be applied when working with adults with care needs and their carers. And the Statement of Government Policy on Adult Safeguarding 2013, a statement about principles used by government agencies, including social services, housing departments, health agencies and police. It sets out governmental policy objectives to prevent abuse and reduce risks of significant harm to vulnerable adults from abuse or other exploitation, and supports individuals in maintaining control over their own lives to enable them to make informed choices. The Disclosure and Barring Service was introduced in 2012 by merging the ISA, the Independent Safeguarding Authority, and the Criminal Records Bureau, the CRB. The DBS provides a joined-up service to combine all aspects of the previous departments together. Employers carry out checks using this service to ensure that employees or potential employees are not barred from working with vulnerable persons. Safeguarding roles and responsibilities in health and care services, Department of Health, local government associations. This document gives guidance on the roles and responsibilities of key agencies involving adult safeguarding. Policies and standards issued by national regulatory bodies. There are different regulatory bodies for different parts of the UK. Each have their own policies which set out standards and procedures for preventing, identifying and dealing with abuse, and the bodies are the Care and Quality Commission, the CQC, in England, Social Care and Social Work, Improvement Scotland, Care and Social Services Inspectorate Wales, the Regulation and Quality Improvement Authority, Northern Ireland. Question 5 is asking you to describe the current vetting process for staff at your organisation or an organisation you know well. And that may include background checks, social media, references, eligibility checks, CIFAS staff fraud database, national and local policies. For question 6, it's asking you to identify 2 national policies and 2 local systems that relate to safeguarding and protection from abuse. So for national, you may want to consider the Care Act 2014, the Statement of Government Policy on Adult Safeguarding, Disclosure and Barring Service, and Safeguarding Roles and Responsibilities in Health and Care Services. And for local, educational establishments, police, health professionals. As I said, identify. I want to see some detail surrounding each piece of legislation and some of their key elements. Don't just write the Care Act 2014, as I want to see some information about it so I know that you understand it. Local systems, educational establishments. Schools, colleges, university staff members are responsible for safeguarding those in their care from harm. Each will have their own safeguarding policy in place with designated safeguarding leads who support staff in their respective duties. They will work closely with other services to ensure individuals are cared for. Each local authority must establish a local safeguarding children's board in their area, and these may cover more than one geographical area. Social workers take a lead role in responding to children and families in need of support and help. Conduct inquiries following allegations or suspicion of abuse. Conduct initial assessments and core assessments as part of assessment framework. Chair strategy meetings and initiate subsequent child protection conferences and take court action to safeguard and protect children. Coordinate implementation of child protection plans for children on the Child Protection Register. Care and plan for children in council care and ensure that looked after children are safeguarded in foster homes, children's homes or in any other placements. Police. Police forces work closely with children's social care to protect children and all vulnerable persons from harm. All forces have child abuse investigations units and their responsibilities are to make decisions on whether a crime has been committed and whether to instigate a criminal investigation, to gather evidence from social care and other agencies, to take emergency action to protect children in immediate danger of harm by removing them from those environments, to attend court and give evidence. Healthcare professionals. Healthcare professionals may examine children with injuries where there is a suspicion that they were sustained in a non-accidental fashion. They have a duty to alert social care when abuse is suspected. Healthcare professionals can carry out evidential medical examinations or observations of a child or vulnerable person who has suffered abuse. They also contribute to care reports and may give evidence at court in criminal cases. Roles of agencies in safeguarding and protecting individuals from abuse. The CARE Act 2014, its main responsibility for safeguarding and protecting vulnerable adults rests with local authorities. Systems and procedures deal with all aspects of safeguarding and protection. Alert of abuse. System has policies and procedures in place where someone is alerted or has suspicion there has been abuse, or there is an allegation, and it covers agencies to be notified, actions to be taken, records to be kept, how evidence is gathered and preserved, and management of information. Investigations, suspicions and allegations of abuse investigated. And the system sets out how investigations are handled, policies and procedures for members' agencies to work together to assess an alert of abuse, plan an investigation, conduct the investigation, review outcomes in order to learn lessons. Supporting victims and witnesses. There is a coordinated system to support victims and witnesses between the various agencies. Allegations made against members of staff have specific systems in place, and these cover standards of practice and responsibility mechanisms for alerting different authorities about suspicions or allegations, suspension of staff, record keeping, support and training, and disciplinary processes. Safeguarding agencies local and national. At the local level, local authorities, police forces, NHS trusts, ambulance service, partnership, mental health NHS trusts, probation service, local Department of Care Watch and Age UK, Crown Prosecution Service. At the national level, Department of Health, Care and Quality Commission, Office of the Public Guardian, Disclosure and Barring Service, Equal Human Rights Commission, local authorities, National Health Service, Carers Direct. Question 7 is asking you to explain the roles of 3 different agencies in safeguarding and protecting individuals from abuse. So don't forget, local authorities, Department of Health, the Care and Quality Commission, Police, Disclosure and Barring Service, Office of the Public Guardian, Action on Elder Abuse, and Sharing Information, Equality and Human Rights Commission. So I'd like you to explain the roles. Don't just list them, tell me about them and what they do for the community on local or national situations. Serious safeguarding failures. Can you think of any high-profile safeguarding failures, such as Jimmy Savile and Rotherham with a horrific betrayal of 1,400 children, Dr. Shipman, and elderly care homes being shut down overnight following shocking category of failures? Walton Hall hospital abuse missed at least 100 official visits. An Essex care home owner has been fined £120,000 at Southend following an incident in which a 75-year-old woman was injured, leaving her with life-changing condition. And Victoria Climbier and baby P. Unfortunately, things do sometimes go wrong and lessons need to be learnt to prevent failures from happening again. Sometimes failures or allegations of abuse come to the surface many years after they happened. There have been failures where, due to unconscious bias, victims have not been believed by the police or care agencies, and Rotherham and Jimmy Savile are examples of this. Serious safeguarding failures sometimes hit the headlines, as we have just seen. Inquiries often lead and find a catalogue of failures which have contributed to deaths, injuries and serious abuse and suffering. Reports look in detail at various aspects, including how agencies work together, safeguarding checks and processes, background and history of the offender, actions of regulatory bodies and professional associations, environmental factors, staffing levels, how interagency communications can be improved, inspection and assessment standards. Advice and information. Sources of information and advice. What does your role expect from you or your colleagues in relation to safeguarding? Where can I find this information? Well, sources include job descriptions and employment contracts, supervisors and managers, policies, procedures and training manuals, Health and Care Professions Council, Skills for Care and so forth. Question 8 is asking you to identify 2 reports into serious failures to protect individuals from abuse. So there's the Victoria Climbier and the inquiry, the Baby P reports, Vanessa George case, Winterbourne review, Michael Gilbert, Harold Shipman and the Shipman inquiry. And question 9 is asking you to identify 4 sources of information and advice about your own role in safeguarding and protecting individuals from abuse. So you may want to consider job descriptions and work contracts, supervisors and managers, employers, policies, procedures and training manuals, and Skills for Care, the CQC, the Health and Care Professions Council, and workplace representatives. Now, as I stated before, with identify, don't just list them. I want to see some detail surrounding these cases and the sources of information and advice about your own role. Don't just list them as a list. I'd like to see some information and some key facts and elements around these particular areas, please. Types of abuse. There are many reasons why people commit abuse, and these may include not knowing what a good standard of care is, not knowing about the care services available, having been abused previously and not realising what they are doing now is unacceptable, greed, abuse of power, frustration and experiencing stress, cultural traditions and not knowing it is unlawful. These are not and can never be excuses. There are numerous ways in which abuse may come to light. Victims may not know they are being abused. Guidance on signs of abuse are never exhaustive. Physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, financial abuse, material abuse, domestic violence, modern day slavery, discriminatory abuse, institutional abuse, Next, neglect or acts of omission, self-neglect, female genital mutilation, forced marriage. It's worth noting that the types of injuries or symptoms you may expect to see may not be present. This does not mean that the abuse has not taken place. Not everyone will report being abused. Sometimes victims will withdraw allegations against abusers. And it's worth asking yourself why victims may do these things. Question 10. From the following list, select and define 4 types of abuse. Describe the signs and or symptoms that may be associated with the different types of abuse. And question 11 is asking you to describe factors that may contribute to an individual being more vulnerable to abuse, such as the elderly, young, mentally or physically incapacitated or impaired, being dependent on someone else for care and well-being, physical environment, their social environment, dementia, lack of trained staff on duty, and staff under too much pressure or stress, and isolation. And as described in session 1, these vulnerability factors and signs can be their personal factors such as their difference, their age, their ethnicity, their mental health, their sexual orientation, their religion, their gender and disability, and the situational factors they may find themselves in. There may be elements of risky behaviour, the abuser being present, poverty, lack of support, grooming, immigrant status, lack of power, poor language skills, isolation, coercive control, family instability and adverse community circumstances. And remember that when you add the personal factors to the situational factors, it equals a harm or risk of harm to that individual. Actions, behaviours and situations that may lead to abuse. Certain actions, behaviours or environments are known to raise the risks of harm or abuse, and by recognising them you may be able to do something about it. Knowing the actions, the behaviours, the situations and unacceptable behaviour of other people. Unacceptable behaviour of other people, of those which leaves people scared or intimidated, causes distress, leads them to do things they don't want to do, causes unhappiness, violates the needs or views of others, isn't the kind of behaviour that would normally fit in similar situations. And examples of unacceptable behaviour includes verbal abuse, treating someone with disrespect, sexist, racist comments or jokes, making threats, isolating an individual, and unwanted touching. Question 12 is asking you to explain why individuals might not disclose abuse. So remember, those individuals might disclose abuse because of fear, victim shaming. There may be doubts, maybe because of their gender. If they're male, they don't wish to disclose the abuse because a person carrying out is female. And question 13 is asking you to identify actions, behaviours and situations that may lead to harm or abuse to the individual. So remember, actions such as drinking too much alcohol or taking drugs. Behaviours, being too friendly, being aggressive and confrontational. Situations, meeting strangers from the internet, such. Question 14 is asking you to explain when the behaviour of others might be unacceptable and when it leaves them scared and intimidated, causes distress, leads an individual to do something they don't want to, causes unhappiness, violates the needs or views of other people, and doesn't fit in with normally social acceptable behaviour. So I want to see some details surrounding these elements, please. Don't just write leaves people scared, intimidated. Why is that the case? Tell me some key reasons around it and what makes it work. Reporting a concern. What should you do? Is it an emergency? Is there an immediate risk of significant harm? If the answer is yes, then inform the police on 999. Then, contact the designated safeguarding officer in your organisation or line manager. Then, the designated safeguarding officer will manage the allegation in compliance to policies and legal obligations. If it is not an emergency or there is no immediate risk of significant harm, then you make a careful record of what you observe or what you are told. Then you contact the designated safeguarding officer in your organisation or line manager. And then the designated safeguarding officer will manage the allegation in compliance to policies and legal obligations. Actions to take if abuse or harm is disclosed, suspected or alleged. A person entrusts you with information of a personal nature, and you have concerns about a person's physical, sexual, emotional well-being. You have a moral and professional responsibility to seek advice and support from your designated safeguarding officer. Any safeguarding concerns or allegations about a staff member, trustee or volunteer must be immediately reported. Think evidence. Make notes of what has been alleged and your observations. Preserve the scene if there is one. Let nobody go in there if it is a room. Preserve any other evidence. Secure CCTV if there is one. And do not touch or tamper with the evidence. Question 15 is asking you to describe what actions to take when there are concerns that an individual might have been harmed or abused. So those actions may be to follow organisational policies and procedures, refer to an organisational training material, report issues to line managers, report concerns to social worker, GP, police officer, safeguarding coordinator at the local council, discuss and record concerns with a line manager, complete a risk assessment and make a referral to the local authority and social care team, and keep a written record of reports and conversations. Please don't just list these as shown here. We want to see some information about them and some detail surrounding each of these if you are going to use some of these actions. You may even have some others that you may can think of. Handling disclosure. Do remain calm, approachable and receptive. Listen carefully without interrupting. Acknowledge that you understand how difficult this may be. Make it clear that you are taking what is said seriously. Reassure them that they have done the right thing in telling you. Let them know that you'll do everything you can to help them, and make a written record of exactly what has been said. Don't promise confidentiality. Don't ask leading or probing questions. Do not investigate. It is the police's job to do that. Do not repeatedly ask questions or ask the individual to keep repeating the disclosure. Do not discuss the disclosure with people who do not need to know, and do not delay in reporting the disclosure to the DSO. You must ensure that all information remains confidential, and this should not be disclosed unless to a person in charge of an investigation, such as a manager, police officer or safeguarding coordinator. You must follow your organisation's policies, and all staff should have copies of this policy and must know its contents. You are responsible for keeping data and information safe. Information in whatever format must be kept safe and secure, and ordinarily personal information must not be disclosed without consent of the person it relates to. For children, this may not be possible. GDPR allows information to be shared to detect crime. If the person is at risk of serious harm, confidentiality can be breached. Question 16 is asking you to explain the actions to take if abuse or harm is disclosed, suspected or alleged. So disclosed, listen without making judgment, report the facts immediately. Make notes and written reports and make sure the individual is safe and leave the evidence alone. If it is suspected, report it to an appropriate person, make notes and written reports, listen to the individual, don't make judgments, and make sure the individual is safe. Question 17 is asking you to describe the boundaries of confidentiality. So remember, all information related to abuse or harm must be kept confidential. Only the police in charge of the investigation can ask you to disclose confidential information. You should understand legal and professional boundaries related to confidentiality. You may need written permission from the individual before you can disclose confidential information. Confidentiality can only be breached if a child or someone you're caring for is at risk of serious harm. And never promise confidentiality. Question 18 is asking you to explain how following procedures helps protect staff members from allegations and complaints, as well as protecting other people from harm or abuse. And it provides a framework that allows safe and productive working, allows individuals to feel confident that they are fulfilling their role, and provides protection against misconduct claims. How your actions or statements could affect the use of evidence in court. Policies and procedures have been put in place based on legal requirements and best practice, and they are frameworks in which employees can safely work through the protections they give. By following policies and procedures, staff can act confidently in the knowledge that they are acting within the requirements of their role while protecting those they work with. Misconduct hearings against staff seek to establish if policies and procedures were complied with. How your actions or statements could affect the use of evidence in court. We have already discussed the dangers of tampering or destroying evidence. Valuable evidence is easily contaminated, so every care should be taken. We have also examined the dangers of not following policy and procedure. Organisations may be criticised where staff have failed to follow policy and procedures, causing reputational damage. You may also jeopardise investigations. We have also examined different questioning styles and the dangers of using inappropriate questions. Repeatedly using closed or leading questions could influence what a victim says and contaminate their evidence, risking future trials at court. We have also discussed the dangers associated with changing, adding or removing information. This also risks undermining the victim's credibility or that of your organisation or indeed yourself, and about not maintaining confidentiality. Not only would you be breaching your organisation's policies and procedures, you could potentially be breaking the law and could be prosecuted. Some cases have protections in place regarding the identities of the victims and or defendants, and by allowing information into the public domain, you could seriously undermine a court trial and leave you and or your organisation subject to legal action. How to access support. There will be occasions when you find yourself in a situation that you do not feel comfortable dealing with. It is important that you seek the appropriate help required, and you need to know who you can approach in these circumstances. Social services can provide safeguarding support. The Care Quality Commission is independent and can provide advice on governmental policies. Cares Direct is run by the NHS, and this is a free helpline which offers advice to carers on various matters including finance, local health, social care options, respite service and transport, professional bodies and trade unions. And finally, blowing the whistle. Safeguarding is not a subject to be studied for a qualification. Everything we do on a daily basis should be underpinned by safeguarding consideration. It should be woven into the fabric of every policy, procedure and action. On occasions, there may be instances where serious concerns you have flagged to the appropriate persons have not been acted on. Whistleblowing is the last resort when all attempts to utilise the appropriate channels have failed. A whistleblower will go outside their organisation to raise their serious concerns. In those instances, the law will protect that person from disciplinary action, dismissal, or bullying and harassment. Question 19 is asking you to explain your own actions or statements, how they could conversely affect the use of investigations in future or in court, and that deals with tampering with or destroying evidence, not following policies and procedures, asking inappropriate or leading questions, changing, adding or removing information, not maintaining confidentiality. And question 20 asks you to explain how to access support in situations that are outside your expertise, experience, role and responsibility, and that includes the use of Social Services Care Quality Commission, Carers Direct Helpline, professional bodies and trade unions. And question 21 is asking you to describe what whistleblowing is. And that leads us to the end of this session. For any questions, please contact us at learners@solutionsequinox.com, and remember to mark your subject headings as Cash 2 Safeguarding. Thank you for listening. For feedback, we hope this presentation was helpful to you. And we're always interested in hearing your feedback, so please why not leave us a message through our website, on our sets channel, at YouTube, or contact us via email.